My boyfriend of 8 years cheated with my best friend the night before her millionaire wedding. All my friends knew and laughed at me. But the next day, I exposed the truth in front of everyone, and they never saw coming what destroyed them. I'm 28 years old. I run my father's office supplies company, and what I'm about to tell you basically destroyed everything I thought was my life about 2 years ago. I don't know why I feel like I need to write this now. I guess it's because I'm finally in a place where I can see it all clearly, you know? But let's go back to the beginning, because this comes from way before. I met Lucas in college. We were part of this group of 7 friends, 4 guys and 3 girls. You know, the typical little group that forms in freshman year and somehow stays together after graduation. Lucas and I started dating like in sophomore year, and honestly, I thought I had found my person. You know what I mean? He was fun, charismatic, everyone in the group loved him, and I felt like the lucky one to be with him. Among those friends was Isabel, who had been my roommate in the dorm and became my best friend, or at least that's what I thought. After we graduated, Lucas and I moved in together. This was, like 4 years ago, and everything seemed perfect. I mean, we had our problems like any couple, but nothing major. I was working at my dad's company, learning the business because eventually it was going to be in my hands, and Lucas was working in marketing for a mid-sized company. On weekends, we'd go out with the group, have barbecues, go to bars, the typical 20-something life. The thing is that as time went by, I started thinking more seriously about the future. You know, marriage, family, those things. I was like 26 years old and felt that after 6 years together, it was natural to start talking about that. But every time I mentioned it, Lucas would change the subject or say we were still young. Why rush? At first, I didn't think much of it. But after 2 more years of the same thing, I started feeling frustrated. Like really frustrated. I'd see other couples who'd been together less time getting engaged, and I was still waiting for Lucas to be ready. My parents would subtly ask me when we were going to take the next step, and I didn't know what to tell them. The truth is, I started doubting if Lucas really saw me in his long-term future, but every time I tried to have that serious conversation, he'd assure me he loved me, that he just needed more time, and I, like an idiot, believed him. So we get to 2 years ago, when Isabel announced she was getting married. We were all like shocked because she'd been dating this guy, Vincent, for less than a year, and plus he was like 60 years older than her, literally could be her grandfather. Isabel told us she'd fallen in love, that age didn't matter, that whole story, and me being the good friend I thought I was, I supported her completely. She asked me to be one of her bridesmaids, and of course I said yes, although honestly I thought she was making a mistake getting married so fast and to someone so much older. The wedding was going to be at a super fancy hotel, like one of those that have giant event halls and everything's covered in marble and chandeliers. There was a whole week of events leading up to it, you know, because Vincent's family had money and wanted to do things big. The night before the wedding, there was a rehearsal dinner, but it turns out I suffer from migraines, and that night I got a horrible one of those that make you see lights and feel like your head's going to explode. I told Lucas I was going to skip the dinner, that I was going to take my medicine and rest in the hotel room. I went to bed like at 7 at night, took my medication and tried to sleep, but the migraine wasn't getting better. Around 9 at night, I decided I needed to get a stronger painkiller from the pharmacy because the one I had wasn't doing anything. I threw something on and went down to the hotel parking lot, thinking about driving to the nearest pharmacy. And this is where everything went to shit. Literally. I got to the parking lot and started looking for my car, which I'd left like in the 3rd row. And when I get closer, I see there are 2 people inside. At first, I thought someone had stolen my car or something, but when I get closer, I recognize the people. It was Lucas, my boyfriend of 8 years, making out with Isabel, my supposed best friend who was getting married the next day. They weren't just kissing. I mean, his hands were all over the place, and she was literally sitting on top of him in the driver's seat. My car, my boyfriend, my best friend. The night before her wedding. I froze. Like my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The migraine suddenly didn't matter because there was something much more painful exploding in my chest. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe it was seconds, but it felt like hours. And then they separated for a moment and Lucas looked toward where I was. Our eyes met, and the expression on his face was pure panic, like when a kid gets caught stealing cookies. Isabel also turned and saw me. And you know what? She didn't even look embarrassed, more annoyed. Like I was the one interrupting something. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and walked back to the hotel. I heard Lucas calling me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. because if I stopped, I was going to collapse right there in the parking lot. I went up the elevator and went straight to my room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed trying to process what I'd just seen. My phone started ringing. It was Lucas, but I didn't answer. He kept calling and calling until I finally turned off my phone. After like half an hour of sitting there in shock, I heard voices in the hallway. I went to the door and recognized the voices of our friends from the group. They were all in the room next door, which turned out to be where some of them were staying. The walls were thin, and I could hear everything perfectly. And what I heard destroyed me even more than seeing Lucas and Isabel together. Carla, one of the girls in the group, was laughing and said something like, "Poor Alexa, if only she knew that Lucas and Isabel have been hooking up for months." And then all of them, all my supposed friends, started laughing. One of the guys said it was funny how I had no idea that it was obvious to everyone but me. Another commented that they were betting how much longer it would take for me to figure it out. And Lucas was there. I could hear his voice defending himself half-heartedly, saying that things with Isabel were complicated, but that he was eventually going to tell me. Isabel then said, and I remember this word for word because it stuck with me. She said that the arrangement with Vincent was just for the money, that he knew she didn't love him, and that basically they had an open marriage agreement where she got financial security and he got a young and pretty wife for appearances. She said that after the wedding, she could keep seeing Lucas without a problem. That Vincent wasn't even going to care because he probably had his own affairs too. I sat on the floor of my room with my back against the door, listening to all these people. I considered my family, my closest friends, mocking me, and revealing that all of them, absolutely all of them, knew about the affair and had been covering for me. Every group gathering, every message in the group chat, every time Lucas supposedly went out with the guys, it had all been a coordinated lie. And the worst part is, they were having fun with this, like literally laughing at how stupid I was. I didn't cry that night, which is weird because I'm the type who cries watching dog commercials. I think I was in shock, or maybe so angry that tears weren't even an option. I stayed up all night, and at some point in the early morning, something changed in me. The sadness turned into a cold and calculated determination. I wasn't going to let this end like this. I wasn't going to be the fool who gets discovered, cries and leaves quietly. Isabel was going to have her wedding. Oh, yes. But it wasn't going to be the wedding she expected. The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. Lucas arrived at the room early, I guess after everyone went to sleep, and I was awake pretending to be asleep. I heard him come in carefully and get into bed without making noise. When the alarm went off, I got up and acted completely normal. Said good morning, asked him how the rehearsal dinner I'd missed had been. He looked tense, nervous, but played along and told me it had been good, that he'd missed me. I got ready for the wedding, put on my bridesmaid dress, which was lavender-colored, horrible by the way, but that didn't matter anymore. Did my makeup, fixed my hair, the whole production. All day I was smiling, hugging Isabel, telling her how beautiful she looked, taking pictures with the group of girlfriends. Isabel looked radiant, like really excited, and I just kept thinking about what I was about to do. The ceremony was going to start at 4 in the afternoon. A hall was decorated with white flowers everywhere. There were like 200 guests. Vincent's rich family was there with their expensive suits and shiny jewelry. Vincent was at the front waiting, a man literally 88 years old with an impeccable suit and an expression that revealed no emotion. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle first. I was third, and I stood in my place, smiling at all the guests. Then Isabel came in on her father's arm, with a spectacular white dress that probably cost more than my car, with a long veil and a bouquet of white roses. She looked like a fairy tale princess, and the music was playing, and everyone was turning to look at her with those admiration faces people make at weddings. She got to the altar, her dad gave her away to Vincent, and the officiant started with the ceremony. Normally there's a moment at weddings where they ask if anyone has any reason why the couple shouldn't get married, right? Well, this officiant was more modern and didn't ask that question, but honestly, I didn't care. I waited until he said something about marriage being a union based on love, trust, and honesty, and then I raised my hand and said, "Excuse me," loud and clear for everyone to hear. The officiant stopped confused. Everyone turned to look at me. Isabel looked at me with wide eyes like, "What are you doing?" And I just smiled. I walked to the front, stood between Vincent and Isabel, and said, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there's something everyone should know before you continue with this. and then I dropped the bomb. I told the 200 guests, Vincent's family, Isabel's parents, everyone, that my boyfriend of 8 years, Lucas, and I pointed to where he was sitting among the guests, and the bride, Isabel, had been having an affair, that I had found them the night before in my car, that our entire group of friends knew and had been hiding it from me, and that Isabel herself had admitted that this marriage was just a financial arrangement with Vincent. The room exploded in murmurs. People started talking all at once. Isabel's mom stood up yelling that I was crazy and jealous. But then I looked at Vincent, expecting some reaction, and the man simply turned to look at Isabel with an expression of complete disappointment. He didn't say anything, just took off the microphone he had on, turned around and walked to the exit. His relatives followed him, and within minutes half the room was emptying out. Isabel was screaming at me, literally screaming that I had ruined her life. How dare I? That I was a vengeful bitch. Lucas came running trying to explain I don't know what, and the other friends in the group were in shock trying to leave discreetly. I just took off the bouquet I was holding, left it on a chair, and walked to the exit while absolute chaos broke out behind me. I left the hotel, got in my car, which was still in the parking lot where I'd found Lucas and Isabel the night before, and drove straight home. I had packed bags before going to the wedding because I knew this was going to end with Lucas out of my life. So when I got there, I simply left his things outside the door of the apartment we shared and changed the locks. I'd already called a locksmith the day before and had it all coordinated, like I planned this with military precision. The next few days were crazy with messages and calls. Lucas sent me like 50 messages telling me I had ruined Isabel's life, that Vincent had left her without a cent, that her family was destroyed, that I was a horrible person for doing that so publicly. At no point did he apologize for cheating on me for 8 years. He just blamed me for exposing their affair. Isabel also tried to contact me, but I'd already blocked her on everything. Like a week later, I found out from a cousin of Isabel's who curiously did like me and understood why I did what I did, that indeed Vincent had canceled everything, that Isabel lost the financial arrangement she had secured, and that her parents were furious with her for embarrassing them in front of their entire extended family. Honestly, I didn't feel even a bit of guilt. They had betrayed me in the worst possible way and for months, years in Lucas's case. So for me, this was simply justice. I sent Lucas a message, just one, telling him he had a week to pick up his things or I was going to donate them. I blocked all the friends in the group except him, because I needed him to be able to contact me to coordinate picking up his belongings. But after that, I planned to block him too. I didn't want to know anything about any of them ever again. Lucas came 9 days later, showed up with 2 friends from the group, eager to help him carry boxes, and I tried to keep the interaction as brief as possible. But he tried to have a conversation, told me we needed to talk, that things were more complicated than I thought. And I, who had been keeping my composure since the wedding, finally exploded. I told him there was nothing complicated about what he'd done, that he'd cheated on me for years with my best friend, that our entire group of friends knew and mocked me behind my back, that he'd stolen years of my life that I could have spent with someone who really valued me. He had the nerve, the damn nerve, to say that I was also partly to blame because I pressured him too much about marriage. That's why he'd sought comfort in Isabel. Like, seriously? After 8 years together and 4 living together, it was too much pressure to want to get married? I told him to get out of my apartment and that I never wanted to see him again. He picked up his boxes, left. And the moment he closed the door, I blocked him from everything. Phone, social media, email, everything. The following months were difficult. I'm not going to lie. Not so much because I missed Lucas. Because honestly, after everything that happened, there was nothing left to miss. But because of the feeling of having lost my entire social network all at once. Those were my friends since college, the people I'd shared almost 10 years of my life with. And they all turned out to be horrible people who enjoyed my suffering. I felt stupid for not realizing it before, for having trusted them so much. But I also felt liberated in a way, you know? Like I no longer had to pretend or maintain relationships that were clearly toxic. I started focusing on myself, on my mental and physical health. I joined the gym, started doing yoga, began writing in a journal every night before bed. My family was incredible during all this time. My dad, especially. He never pressured me to talk about what happened, but was always there when I needed him. Fast forward to now. 2 years later. My life is completely different and honestly much better than it ever was with Lucas. My dad's company is growing incredibly. We've expanded to 3 new cities, and I'm practically running the entire operation alone because dad is thinking about retiring soon. I became a super physically active person. I run marathons, do CrossFit, things I never imagined I'd do. I have new friends, people I met at the gym and at work, networking events, people who really value and support me. Like 6 months ago, I found out from a mutual acquaintance, because this is a small world and people can't help but gossip, that Lucas and Isabel eventually got married, but they divorced less than a year later. Apparently, the relationship didn't work once. They didn't have the element of the secret affair that made it exciting, or something like that. Honestly, it didn't surprise me. Relationships that start that way rarely end well. And here comes the part that probably sounds very corny, like a romantic movie, but it's true. 3 months ago, I met someone new. A guy who's an architect and who I met at an art exhibition I went to with a friend. His name is Mateo. He's 31 years old, and from the beginning he was completely different from Lucas. He asked me out directly. No mind games, no confusing signals, just honesty. On our third date, he asked me what I was looking for in a long-term relationship, and when I told him I eventually wanted to get married and have a family, he said that was exactly what he wanted too. I'm not saying I'm going to marry Mateo tomorrow, or that he's perfect, because nobody is. But it's refreshing to be with someone who knows what he wants, who respects me, who communicates his feelings to me, and who doesn't make me feel crazy for wanting a real commitment. My new friends met him last month and they all said you can tell he treats me differently. Like there's a mutual respect I never had with Lucas. Do I regret doing what I did at that wedding? Honestly, no. Sometimes people ask me if I don't feel bad for ruining Isabel's day in such a public way, and my answer is always the same. She ruined 8 years of my life in a private and cruel way. I simply exposed the truth at a moment when it mattered. Vincent deserved to know who he was marrying, the guests deserved not to be part of a farce, and I deserved some justice after years of being deceived. Would I have liked things to be different? Of course. I would have loved for Lucas to have been honest with me from the beginning, for him to have told me if he didn't want to get married or if he didn't love me anymore, for Isabel to have been the friend I thought she was. But people are who they are, and sometimes it takes something this devastating for you to realize who you really have around you. Last week, my mom asked me if I had forgiven Lucas and Isabel, and the truth is, I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. I don't think about them practically ever. I don't feel that burning rage I felt the first months, but I also can't say I forgave them because that would imply I'm somehow okay with what they did. It's more like indifference, like they're simply people who existed in my past and no longer have any place in my present or future. But what I do know is that whole experience taught me a lot about my own strength. Before all this, I probably would have stayed with Lucas, even knowing about the affair. Would have tried to fix it, to understand why he did it, to change to be better. But now I know I deserve more than that I deserve honesty and respect and real commitment, and that I don't have to settle for less just because I've been with someone for many years. Mateo took me to dinner a few days ago and told me he admires my strength, that he thinks it's incredible how I rebuilt my life after something like that. And I told him the truth, that I didn't feel strong when it was happening, that many nights I cried alone in my apartment wondering what I'd done wrong, why I hadn't been enough, but that eventually you realize it's not about being enough for someone else, but about being enough for yourself, and surrounding yourself with people who see your value, without you having to constantly prove it. I guess if anything good came out of this whole situation, it's that now I know exactly what I don't want in my life, and that makes it much easier to identify what I do want. I don't need a big group of friends if they're not genuine. I'd rather have 4 real people than 20 fake ones. I don't need to be in a relationship for years just because of the time invested. I'd rather be alone than with someone who doesn't value me. And I definitely don't need to close my eyes to red flags, just because accepting the truth is painful. The company is growing, my body is stronger than ever, I have a new relationship that so far seems promising, and most importantly, I have peace of mind. I don't wake up wondering if my partner is cheating on me. I don't have to deal with toxic friends who talk about me behind my back. I don't have to beg anyone to see me as worthy of commitment. And that peace of knowing I'm surrounded by people who really want what's best for me is worth more than anything else. So yes, Lucas and Isabel betrayed me in the worst possible way, and our group of friends turned out to be a bunch of horrible people. But at the end of the day, they did me a favor by showing their true colors, because if I'd stayed in that relationship and with those friends, I'd probably be much worse off now. Sometimes the worst betrayals end up being the best liberations, and I think that's my case. I don't know what's going to happen with Mateo long term. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but at least I know I'm entering this being completely myself, without pretending to be someone else, without accepting crumbs of affection, without settling for less than I deserve. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to be okay anyway, because I learned I can survive things I thought were going to destroy me, and that on the other side of betrayal and pain, there's a version of myself who's stronger, wiser, and much happier.